Hope everyone's having a great weekend. Everything is awesome here on this end. As of this recording, we're actually 2 weeks away from TFCon DC, so I hope to see everyone there. And among what other stuff in the news, it looks like Cyberverse Season 2 just started airing in Japan, and we got a nice surprise that Takagi Wataru, the original voice actor of Cheetor in the Japanese version of Beast Wars, or Cheetahs as he was called, is reprising the role of Cheetor in Cyberverse. So that's pretty cool. Kind of makes us wish we got Ian Corlett, huh? But that's not what we're here today to talk about. Today is a Patreon listener question. Once again, if you are interested in being part of the Patreon, be sure to check the description below with all the cool stuff that Patreon has to offer the fans. This question actually seems like it stemmed from a follow-up from the last Patreon listener question, which got a lot of discussion, both in the comments and also later on Twitter. This one comes from TheGreySkull, and TheGreySkull asks, your last listener question briefly touched on reissues and the value they have in Transformer collecting. Can you talk more about that? I would love to hear your deeper take on it. TheGreySkull. So, the last question that I believe came from MassiveGains, he asked about bootlegs and knockoffs and where they fit in our hobby. And I briefly touched on one-off or one-by-one reissues and bootleg reissues. But I guess he really wants to know my take on straight-up reissues done by Hasbro and Takara and their value in the Transformer collecting. There's kind of two ways to tackle this, because I find that when we start looking at reissues, and when we're talking reissues, up to this point, really, 99% of Transformer reissues are that of Generation 1. More specifically, early Generation 1. Yeah, a few of them have been recent characters. I know we had a Star Convoy reissue in about, 2006-ish, 2007, we had a Star Convoy reissue. And, and in recent years, we've started to see some reissues of the more newer stuff like Beast Wars Neo reissues, Beast Wars reissues, little characters here and there. But a primary number of the reissues are Generation 1. Generation 1 toys, 84, 85, 86, 87 specifically. And there's two camps on how they feel about this. And my own personal opinion doesn't really matter, but I'll give it anyways, but it doesn't really matter in the final conclusion. But there really is two camps. There's the people that are investors within the hobby and speculators within the hobby, and they don't like reissues because they feel it damages the value of the original product. And some could argue, well, reissues in a lot of ways, they are different. There is minor tweaks and changes that are done to even the reissues so that the original product still has some kind of uniqueness to it. But I do agree that it does damage the value a little bit. And in a sense that, a purist like me, I'll always buy the original. I'm not a fan of the reissues. I just have a purist in me that I'll always want to own the original. And I'll pay that money to own the original. But I do agree that there is a lot of people, and I know a lot of people in the fandom, close people that I know in the fandom, that rather just buy the reissue than the original product. Just because it's cheaper, it's easier, it's just the way for them to go. And I know some people that literally almost their entire Generation 1 collection consists of reissue product, whether it be Takara-Tomy or Hasbro. So that's a route that a lot of people are willing to go. And when you're someone, again, getting back to the investor and speculators, people who buy product for a hope of value increasing or at least holding, those reissues in a lot of ways hurt that, because the demand for those original products completely subside in the face of a reissue. Best case scenario, best example that I could give of, let's say, expensive product. And again, I touched on it a little bit in the bootleg segment that I did 2 days ago, but it seems that it could kind of apply here too, where, those Dino cassettes, the Hasbro official reissue, now that they exist, the Hasbro official reissue, is going to completely decimate any kind of demand or interest from completists that want to own the original Dino cassettes, the $500 a piece ones from 1987's Headmasters. But, again, there still will be purists like me and a few others that still preferably would like to own the originals over the reissues and having the original little box and everything. But that being said, there's a lot of people that might have thought of taking that plunge from a completist standpoint, but now will never have to think about it because they are totally fine with settling with the Hasbro reissue. Same thing goes for Minerva. I constantly talk about how I'd like for a Minerva reissue to exist so people could own that toy instead of doing what I did. I mean, I spent 4 digits. I don't want to say how much exactly, but I spent 4 digits for my Minerva, my 100% complete, almost bone white, stickers unapplied, perfect Minerva. I would never have to expect anyone else to do that, especially to own a toy that I know for a fact the mold is still kicking around at Hasbro's Ohio, storage facility. So it's something that one day, if there is a reissue, hey, that's great for a majority of the fandom that their G1 display is missing that Minerva figure, and now they'd be able to get it at a much cheaper value. But then the Minerva, well, not so much the Minerva, but again, the speculators and the investors would hate what I'm saying here because now they're investing and purchasing in Generation 1 Minervas from Masterforce goes in the toilet because most of the demand disappears. Not to mention that's a toy already, when you find it in any condition, is usually a little yellowed and stuff, so to have like a perfect bone white one is almost a guarantee, at least with this. And that's another thing too, the reason why the reissues became so popular and prevalent and such a good replacement for a lot of the old Generation 1 originals is just condition and quality. You could buy a reissue Takara-Tomy book box, original Takara book box Generation 1 Japanese reissue of Prowl, and you're guaranteed to have perfect chrome missiles and perfect chrome this, and the figure won't be like scratched windshield or something broken. It's fresh, it's perfect. And if you buy from a guy that sells you a 100% complete Prowl and everything on eBay, you don't know if it's going to have loose joints or if the sticker is worn or if the stickers are missing completely. So there's always that roll of the dice, and a lot of guys who just want to have a Generation 1 1984 Prowl, they'll settle for the reissue because at least they're going to get something case fresh in a lot of ways and perfect and complete. Now, granted, again, the Hasbro reissues do have their safety standards changed, so certain missiles are not the same size as they used to be, or little pieces of the plastic had to be rounded off because they were sharper with the original 80s release. But, Takara versions usually kind of skate and avoid that problem, and so people go that route. But ultimately, in the end, it's always the cheaper route than a complete original one. So again, it has its purpose with people, but at the same time, it does damage the market value. And I've seen that, firsthand. Again, Stepper is another one. The second the Target Master Stepper, which was the black repaint of Jazz, the second that Takara book box reissue came out, and then later on even Hasbro, when they did their Hasbro reissue of it, the book box reissue, that just totally decimated the demand and interest in the old Target Master release of Stepper from Japan. That was, again, one of those like $500, $600 characters, loose, complete. Now it's, you have to find a very specific buyer that might be interested, but most people now are willing to settle for the reissue. It's a story that just keeps going and going. And it's something that as time progresses, if Takara-Tomy continues to want to revisit specific molds, it just gives better opportunities. I mean, we just had the Big Convoy reissue. Now, granted, Big Convoy wasn't one of those toys that his original Beast Wars Neo one was like expensive and hard to get or difficult in value. We had those Korean reissues that came out a couple years after the Beast Wars Neo Japanese ones. And I mean, that kind of kept that mold in circulation on an official manner in the market. So it never really, I want to say it never really got past 50, 60 bucks ever from its original MSRP of translation, the 50, 60 bucks from yen. So that was one that never really got affected by it. And when the reissue came out, I mean, the original intent was really just to go for more, let's repaint it and give it more show accuracy than a straight up reissue of the original toy. And then, of course, we got the reissue of the original toy, but they gave extra accessories. But you know what I'm getting at. It's just nowadays a lot of reissues that we see, they kind of want to revisit the mold and give it a different paint scheme or something. That way they make the sale for people who wanted to own the original toy, and potentially will make a sale again from someone who already owns it, someone like me, because of the potentialness of, oh, wow, there's something different about it. There's a reason to own it. Like in the case of the anime-colored Big Convoy. No reason for me to own it, but now it's like, oh, it has nicer colors, more anime accurate. Definitely worth considering. Like any repaint, you know, that's the job of it, to make another sale of the same mold, even if it's just minor. And, you know, like, I mean, we had Predaking. We had a Predaking reissue, I want to say, God, it must have been 10 years ago. We had a Predaking reissue, you know, and yeah, they gave a new accessory, which came from the Transformers Prime line of all things, but it gave a much cheaper alternative for people to pick up a complete Generation 1 Predaking. Sure, the colors were a little off and the plastic was not the metal version, it was the plastic version. But I mean, it still was a Predaking that saved you a lot of money instead of having to buy a $350 to $400 complete one that might not even be in that great condition in the secondary market from that, you know, 1987 release. So it has its purpose. But I also feel, and this is another thing too, that the demand for Generation 1 toys is decreasing significantly as every year passes. I notice more and more as time passes, less people are interested in putting their money into Generation 1 product. And by that, I mean the original Generation 1 product. Yeah, you'll have people that really want to own an original Star Saber or Diatlas, but that 84, 85, 86, 87 crew, a lot of those guys and the people that are interested in buying those characters, they're going to go classics. They're going to go masterpiece. They're going to go third party. They're not going to want to go back and own the rookie card, and I use air quotes here, the rookie card of that character. They don't want to own the original. They want to own the best representation of the screen character in plastic form. And Generation 1, unfortunately, is usually not the best route. You know, like for every Generation 1 Shockwave that pretty much gets it, you know, and knocks it out of the park, you have Ironhide. You know, you have Ratchet. So there's a lot of that. Even the likes of, look, you can't say that that 1986 Hot Rod is a perfect, you know, screen representation of the animation model. You know, Hot Rod doesn't have an engine on the back of his head like the toy does. So little things like that. It's something that also kind of affects now the market, and reissues make it cheaper. So if you are interested in taking the plunge on some of these original toys, here's a cheaper alternative. So essentially, long answer short, reissues serve a purpose for people that want to get a cheap alternative to the real deal. They're willing to settle for that. But if you're someone who's an investor or a collector, it's going to hurt the value. They're going to hurt the value significantly. The second that, if it happens, the second that G1 Minerva comes out, every single one of those original Minervas is really going to, you know, cease to have a purpose. It's the same thing. The best example, I totally forgot. For the longest time, people would just sell completely naked, missing every piece and accessory, including the head, Fortress Maximus bodies back in the day. People would buy a Fortress Maximus body, missing the head, missing the guns, missing the weapons, missing everything. And it would be like a starter Fortress Maximus. And then that reissue came out in 2012, the Encore from Japan. And every single dude that wanted to have, at the time, the biggest Transformer of all time, was willing to settle for the reissue. Even me, like, the funny thing is I bought that reissue just so I could get the sword and the extra accessories to put on my original Fortress Maximus, because I was missing some pieces here and there, specifically the Japanese Master Sword and stuff like that. And then I turned around and sold the rest of the Fortress Maximus for the same price. I paid like $350 Canadian. I was very lucky because I got it right when it came out. And I turned around and sold it for the same price practically, minus a few accessories, because people were just happy to have it. And, and that was in a day and age when Titan Metroplex still didn't exist yet. And of course, the Titan Fortress Maximus that we have today. So it's something that, even that, when that came out, now all those guys that were sitting on, naked Fortress Maximus bodies from Generation 1 from 1987, they couldn't be asking $200 a piece or $100 a piece. Now they were stuck with them because they knew that people had a cheaper, more sound alternative. Okay, granted, yes, a complete Encore Fortress Maximus MSRP when it first came out was like $300 American, $350 Canadian. But when you thought about what a complete G1 Fortress Maximus 87 was before this reissue, $600, $700, sometimes even more, almost $1,000 with some people. So clearly the market changed because of that. So it will serve a purpose. It does serve a purpose. It helped me in the past. It's helped other people in the past. And even though, again, I'm a purist, and at the end of the day, I still want to own the original. But in this day and age, people, there's only a finite amount of complete Sunstreakers out there. There's only a finite amount of complete Mirages and other characters out there. And the reissue at least could come in there and kind of fill the void for people who can't get those toys or have the budget to spend, $200, $300. I mean, I'll never forget. I think I mentioned this on the podcast. I'll never forget when eBay first started up and it started to really get traction in 99, 2000. Some of the very first TF auctions, which were Generation 1 toys. This was like we were knee deep in Beast Machines at the time. Some of the very first Generation 1 auctions, like G1 Prowl, were selling, they would end at like $700, $800. I remember a complete G1 Prowl sold for $800 American, which at the time, which was still Clinton administration, the exchange rate was crazy, which came to almost over $1,000, easily over $1,000 Canadian. And I was like, $1,000 for a complete G1 Prowl. And here was me hoping to complete some of my Generation 1 collection back in 1999 and going is that what it's going to take? Am I going to need $1,000 to complete one 1984 car robot in Prowl? Luckily, that wasn't. It didn't have to be the case, but that was once a reality. Today, Takara Book Box reissue hits the scene. Was it $60 at the time? MSRP from Japan. Changed the game. Changed the game completely. So that's the long short answer of it, more or less. It is what it is. Let me know what you think about reissues. Who would you like to see reissued, especially? Again, me, for my non-selfish reasons, I'd like to see Minerva reissued so other people could enjoy it. Same thing, Star Saber, Diatlas. Some of those really fun molds that I've been able to enjoy but are really expensive entry points. But from a selfish standpoint, I don't know. That's a good one. I would like to see reissued maybe some of those Diaclon colors that I've never been able to get. I don't know, red Sunstreaker. I don't know, blue streak. Maybe I don't know. I know I got some of those other odd ones. They did the movie colored ones of the G1s. I don't know, maybe something like that. I'd like to see some of those. That's like an e-hobby kind of thing. But still, I'd like to see some of those from the Diaclon Microman kind of world. But yeah, let me know. Let me know what you guys would like to see. And thanks again for the listener question, Patreon listener question, The Grey Skull. And hopefully I covered everything you needed.